Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Zion City Council. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Here.
Commissioner Ferguson?
Here.
Commissioner McDowell?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Here.
Mayor McKinney?
Mr. Bremner, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Please join me in the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Pastor Carlson?
Thank you. I'm dressed up on the top and comfortable on the bottom. Hope that's okay. In case I'm not received well, I'll make a fast dash for the door. I appreciate the opportunity to come and open our meeting in prayer. Shall we do that? God in heaven, I thank you so much for your goodness and your grace. In an age of givingness and wanting and selfishness, Father, which is just human nature, and in a time of legitimate need as well, Father, we should take time to thank you for all the things that you have given to us. And I always try to start that way, and I do that today. Thank you, Father, for my community. Thank you for these officials who do so much to keep us safe and to help things work well. Thank you, Father God, that my garbage is picked up every week, that the snow is plowed in the season. Father God, the police are on patrol, that the officers, the EMT, the firefighters are only a phone call away. Thank you for these things that we take for granted until we really need them. Thank you, too, for your grace and mercy, which is always available to us in the season of light. Thank you, Jesus, that you're the light of the world. In a season that needs hope, thank you, Jesus, that you're the hope of the ages. I pray you help us tonight to be able to keep ourselves away from the anger and vitriol that seems to encompass so much of our politics nationally at the state level. Thank you, Father God, that these are folks around me that I love and know and respect. We live together, we work together, we pull together for the betterment of our community. And thank you for that. I pray for blessings tonight as your business is done through these folks. I pray, Father God, certainly for safety for all those who keep us safe, probably in the armed services around the world. And of course, as I mentioned, our first responders. I pray, Father God, you help our teachers as well. Keep them safe on their front line. The healthcare workers, Father, in this continuing pandemic. I just thank you so much that there are people who stand up and stand out and stand for the things that are important and to keep us the community that we love so much. I pray your blessing on each part of the service, on this meeting, on each person involved, and I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Next item on the agenda is agenda changes. Are there any agenda changes from commissioners? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. The next item is a public hearing on proposed property tax levy for 2021. I'll open that hearing and turn it over to City Administrator Nabel.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm going to try and give you a snapshot of a very complicated issue here for tax levy. So I'm going to give you Levy 101. First of all, I'm going to be using the acronym PTEL during my discussion, which is the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law. What that is a state statute that basically says we're capped in what we can ask for, what we can go up by every year. And that's the lesser of 5% or the Consumer Price Index, which was, for these purposes, was 1.4%. So the most we can go up is 1.4% under the statute. So obviously that limits the amount that we're even looking for levy purposes. Now, what that 1.4% is based on the highest amount of taxes extended in the prior 3 years. So last year was the highest extension we've had in the prior 3 years, so we can go up 1.4% from that for the amount that we can ask. What that doesn't include is if there's new construction. So let's say there's a large addition of a business, expansion. We had the hospital expansion probably 6-7 years ago. That was a large addition. that new construction is exempt from that cap. So basically, the P-TEL cap, 1.4% in this case, is what would go up, and then any taxes that we would get from new construction can also be added onto that cap. It's not subject to that cap. So in the numbers that I'm looking at here, or that I'm going to be talking about, it might be a little more than 1.4% because there was about $190,000, I think it was $190,000 of assessed value of new construction during the year. So that brings us down to what we're actually asking for. So what I have here presented is an $8,072,338 levy for consideration. That represents a approximately $272,000 increase over the prior year. Now that is more than the 1.4%. I also have an additional 2% cushion built in there because what happens is, to make this even more complicated, is that the county they have a board of review every year that happens like in February, March, where people can challenge their property values, challenge their assessments, go before a board of appeals at the county, and basically the final values aren't locked in by the county until that time. At which point they come back to the municipalities and they go, hey, here's your values, here's what you actually levied, you might need to make adjustments. Well, the way the statute works, we cannot make adjustments upward if those values go up or we have the potential to levy more. We're only allowed to adjust downwards. So we put more in there to basically cover the chance that something might have been missed. Let's say something was coded to Beach Park that's actually Zion and would add to our values, something like that. Very rarely happens, but 2% of this increase is that cushion. So, but what I've done is I've kind of put numbers in here, two versions. One, the levy that we're passing, but then what I would actually expect that we're going to be able to get, because that's ultimately what we're going to base our budget on and what we're going to be looking at for revenues for next year. So under the levy as I'm proposing we pass, the city's tax rate would go from 2.314 to 2.249. That's a decrease of about 2.8%. Now, what people need to understand is that the tax rate going down does not translate necessarily into property taxes going down. Because what happens is, let's take a big picture approach here. If we ask for $1 million of taxes and the assessed value of everything was $100 million, the rate is the 1%. It's a 1% rate. They take that rate times $100 million and they say, here's your million. Now, next year, we ask for $1 million, but the assessed value is $200 million. It doubles. The rate drops in half to get that same $1 million. So the rate drops in that case, even though we're asking for the same amount. So the rate goes down, but the taxes you would pay are the same, just because property values double. So what we're seeing this year roughly is about a 6% increase in property values. So with our increase, again, 3.4% in the levy, which was really going to be 1.4%, the amount that we're increasing our levy by is less than what property values are going up. So the rate actually comes down. So there's an inverse relationship there between property values and rate. Just to put it in perspective, what I did is I took about $150,000 home, a home that was valued at $150,000, just to kind of wrap our heads around this. Assuming a 6% increase in value from the prior year, this levy would be an increase of about $35 a year in property taxes. This is just for the city's portion, not your total tax bill. The city's about 15% of the total taxes. So, if the schools go up or down, you can see your bill go up or down because they're about 70% of the total tax bill. And you have the park district, the township, even the Lake County Forest Preserve and the county itself, the library. So we're just talking about the city's portion of the tax levy when I talk these numbers. So $150,000 house, assuming 6%, would pay about $35 more a year under this levy. Again, when the adjustments come back, I would expect that to go down, and the effect without that 2% cushion would be about $12 a year in additional property taxes on a $150,000 house. The levy is broken down into 9 different functions. So there's 9 different components to the levy. And on the table you have there, I kind of want to go from the bottom upwards, because even though the first line in that is the corporate levy, which is our general fund, our amount available that we use for our general operations, that amount is, unfortunately in our case, kind of a plug figure of, after all the statutory requirements are met, what we have left over is for our operations. So the fire pension and the police pension, we are statutorily required to levy and put into those funds a certain amount. So there's an actuarial recommended amount, which is what they say you should be putting in there to be fully funded by 2040. Then there's a state statute minimum requirement, which is less than that, but by putting less, it compounds over time to basically go up every year because you're not putting in the full amount recommended. But just to give you a little bit of perspective, so the fire pension and the police pension, the minimum required to go into each of those funds went up by $250,000 each compared to last year. So we would need to levy $500,000 more just to meet those minimum requirements. As you can see, even with the cushion, we can only levy $270,000 more. So we're already in the hole on those funds. We have to put that money in there, though, so that money has to come from somewhere else. It comes by shading off of our operations. But the recommended actuarial amount for the fire pensions is roughly $2.1 million. The minimum is $1.7. So we're about $400,000 short of the recommended amount there. The police pension recommended levy amount is $3.5 million. We're levying 2.8, so we're about $700,000 short there, just in the minimums. If we did those, if we put the additional $1 million that we need to do that, we would have absolutely nothing for any funds left. So we're kind of stuck with a conflict between the tax law from the state saying you can only go up by CPI, but the amount that you have to put into pension funds per the state can accelerate much more than that. So we're basically ending up upside down on some of these levies. Continuing going up, and I'll have plenty of time for questions because I'm throwing a lot at you. The Social Security levy, which is payroll taxes, we have to put Medicare and Social Security from our pension or from our salaries. So that went up by $212,000 from last year. But just to recall, last year we had a fund balance in that fund. So to try and ease the burden on last year's levy, we were using up that fund balance. We levied basically all we needed. After we used up that fund balance, that surplus we had, we still needed to levy $152,000 to make up our annual. This year we're back to $365,000, which is the payroll taxes that we need to levy for salaries. Again, we can't not pay payroll taxes. We're stuck in that regard. The liability insurance levy is all of basically our tort insurance, all of our, as it says, liability insurance. So we levy for that. We have to have liability. We have to have workers' comp. We have to have those premiums. But that is relatively flat. It's actually, our levy is actually going down $22,000 in that regard, but it's still $1.1 million levy. The other item there is IMRF. Again, that's statutory state pension. They set the rate for a funding level and say this is what percent you need to take out. You need to contribute as a city to all employees that are participating in the state pension. We're having the reverse situation on this that we did with Social Security last year, where last year we levied $506,000 because we were anticipating that the market wasn't going to perform as well as it did, and we were expecting that our rate was going to be higher because of the effect of some early retirement incentives that we did from prior years. The rate didn't come in as high and the market performed better, so we had a surplus in that fund last year that we are now reducing our levy down to $106,000 to basically use up that fund. The goal is to have these funds basically operate at a net zero every year. We don't want to be accumulating funds or or levy funds on hand that we don't need to use for that purpose. Next year, that will flip back the other way, back to what we need to do, but for this year, to try and, again, take some of the burden off of the impact on our general fund, we're utilizing that surplus. The ambulance service, the fire protection levy, and the street and bridge, we keep flat because we've already exceeded the amount from those other amounts, the pension funds and the other amounts I addressed. We don't have anything left to add to those. Even with that, what's left for our general fund is actually a $17,000 decrease from prior year, even though we're increasing the levy by, on paper, 3.4%. Again, when they come back and say the adjustments, you have to bring that down. You over levy based on PTEL once the final values come in. I think that 17,000 decrease is actually going to be more around $176,000 decrease. So even by increasing the levy, we're losing $176,000 of revenue in our general fund for operations. And this has been a trend that we've had to deal with for the past few years. We've been able to still maintain services even though that levy used to be, the general fund levy used to be in the $1.5 million range, and now we're down to about $250,000. So we're $1.2 million short in our general fund compared to where we used to be, but we're still trying to find other ways to provide the services that we need to do. So, like I said, I threw a lot at you here, but when it comes time for the ordinance, I'm going to be recommending an approval of the $8,072,338 that you have here. And I will open it up for comments or questions to the public or council. Mr. Brenner.
I understand everything you said. The 6% of $150,000, over $35 a year, which I understand. Now, is that just the city's share, or is that from all? Is that $35 divided amongst all roughly 18 taxing bodies?
That's just the city's share. Every other taxing body goes through the same process. They adopt their own levy, saying how much they're going to ask for, and the impact of that, I can't speak to. I can only speak for that, but that amount I'm talking about is just the city's portion of the tax bill.
Are they also limited at 1.5% or cost of living, whichever is less?
I'm not 100% sure. The finance rules for school districts are a lot different. They have some uncapped funds. I think their transportation fund is uncapped, and then they're allowed to do some transfers with those funds. I think big picture they are limited in that regard, but they're capped is kind of a misleading term on some of these levies because the amount we can levy for police and fire pension is technically uncapped. If that goes up $500,000, we can levy $500,000, but then our total levy is still subject to that PTEL cap. So yes, we can go up in these individual categories by as much as we want, as much as is necessary, but we're still limited in total to that, which is why we have to reduce the other funds to offset that. I don't know if there are some funds that are outside of that PTEL cap. I don't know if there are any in the schools. I'm not a school finance guy. It's been probably 20 years since I've audited school districts, so the law's changed since then.
And then third, you mentioned reconstruction being exempt. What happens in fiscal year 2020? Is it exempt for the life of that? When the construction is done and it goes into use, is it still exempt, or does it come under the cap at that point?
It comes under the cap at that point. So just in the year that it goes on the books for the first time, it's outside of the cap, but now that becomes our new property tax base next year. So in calculating the rate and everything, that will now be included, and then we'll only be able to go 1.4% or 1.5%, whatever the CPI is over that base next year.
I thank you, sir, for your courtesy.
Appreciate the questions.
Yeah, the $15 million grant that comes with the legislation signed by Governor Pritzker, how is that going to impact the city, and when will you see it in the budget?
We probably, again, this is a state grant, so it's
Not certain.
right. But anything in that grant is not going to be a part of the city or the state's budget or plans until their fiscal year runs June or July to June. So that won't be until their July 22 to June 23 budget for whatever they put in there. Additionally, whatever value we put on the fuel rods won't be potentially on until 22's values, which wouldn't be until 23's tax levy. So if we get the grant next year, it wouldn't be until late next year or possibly even 23. So that we're not projecting anything for next year's budget. Our fiscal year runs May to April. So for our May to April, we're not planning on anything in our budget that we can't count on 100%.
Right.
That would most likely be reflected, rather than our 22-23 budget, our 23-24, because then we would see what actually happened with the state. And if we receive that grant, we would then be able to adjust our budget accordingly for the subsequent year, rather than trying to plan on dollars that we hope we obtain and then be kind of in a crisis mode. Does that help?
Can I make one comment?
Sure.
On dollars we hope we obtain? Would you apply them to pension funds, please? Start paying that stuff down.
That will be a council decision, but there'll be a lot of discussion once we get those funds, if we get those funds, how to best apply those. But yes, that's
So we don't end up like this again.
I look at the pension funds. What people can kind of relate this to is best is credit card debt, because people are used to that. Unfortunately, we have a credit card situation in this country. But if you think of a credit card bill, let's say you have a $10,000 credit card bill, your minimum payment might be $100 or $200 a month, but your interest is $300. So you make your minimum payment, but your balance actually goes up. And now next month your minimum payment is $205, but your interest is $330. So you end up with this ever-inflating balance that as long as you're just making the minimum payments, you'll never get out of that debt. That's essentially what we've got going on with the pension situation. We're pushing hard we're going to be pushing hard, even harder, to our state legislators, because a lot of other pension funds either have revolving amortization terms, so it's always 20 years from whatever the date is now, and they amortize that, or it's 2050 or beyond. Right now, the police and fire pension funds are locked in at 2040, which, if you think about it, it's like refinance. It's like if you're trying to get a mortgage and you're saying, I'm going to do a 10-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year, payment's a lot higher. If we could refinance this basically to a 30-year term, we still meet our obligations, but that monthly or annual payment that we have to put in there goes down with still the same end result. So they're debating on whether to have this rolling amortization period or just extend it out. Well, in the meantime, we're stuck while they try and figure out what they want to do with these ever-increasing pension payments. So when you hear about the pension crisis, this is what we're talking about. We're in crisis. They're trying to figure out how to best legislate it, but nothing's happening on either side. And every year that goes by, we go further in the hole on this. Our pension fund levies used to be about 20% of our total levy. We're about 50% now. So it's a big crisis. It's a big issue. Oh, yeah, what the chief is mentioning, and this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the levy, but the state is consolidating a lot of the police and fire pension funds. They're going to be, rather than having individual local authorities on a lot of these funds, they're just going to have one large downstate pension fund. I'm torn on that because it puts it in the state control, takes it out of the local level. Other than our administration of some general decisions, but the management of the money will actually all be at the state level. There's a lot of suits right now arguing that they don't have the authority for that or they can't be forced to take part of it. A lot of back and forth on that. Our pension funds, two reasons for this is you have a lot of small municipal pension funds, really small towns that haven't been putting their minimum contributions in, aren't able to benefit from investing, getting good returns with larger volumes. So this will help them out as far as reduction of fees, because if you have $1 million pension fund, an investment broker is going to charge you X amount. They're not just going to take a small percent. There's going to be a flat fee associated with that they're going to have to get a lot of return on just to cover, and they can't get those returns. Well, that's great. That'll help them, but our pension funds have always had pretty good returns and have exceeded the market. So I don't expect that's going to, we're kind of in that mid-range that it's not really going to benefit us. We might save a little bit on fees, but it's not going to generate big returns for us compared to what we were already getting. I'm worried that it actually might be a little less. So some funds will benefit, some will suffer, and we won't really have a whole lot of say in where this money goes. They'll administer all the payments to beneficiaries. We'll just handle some of the administrative decisions at the local level. Doesn't affect the levy, it doesn't affect the amortization period, but it might change actuarial calculations down the road if for some reason the state's able to get 7% return on this stuff and they can amortize based on that. That could reduce our actuarial contribution, but it's still kind of up in the air. I mean, we're moving forward with it. We have to. We're being forced to consolidate all these together. But how this is going to play out and what impact it will have on us is yet to be seen.
Kind of to that point about the return in the markets. So I noticed that from a few years ago, the pension funds are now less funded than they were several years back, but the market's done pretty well for the last couple of years. So can you talk to why the slippage?
A lot of that is because of the minimum versus the actual funding. So, increases in pension benefits are 3%. They factored in there. We have a good amount of individuals that are either out on duty disability or just retired. So life expectancies are, which is a good thing, are going longer, but actuarial tables are adjusting up for that as well, saying you're going to have to pay these higher level of benefits for a longer period, which might not have been factored in originally. I mean, when these were first set up, you had firefighters that were using their beards to, stop asbestos inhaling smoke. You didn't have they would work 20 years because their life expectancy was very low. So you'd retire at 50, but you didn't have a normal lifespan expected. That was a hazard of the job. But now that life expectancy is approaching that of anyone else, just based on safety equipment, things like that. But the retirement ages haven't really caught up with that, so now you're paying benefits longer, which are promised benefits that you have to do that. And also if you're not funding what's recommended, that shortage is coming into play, so you're having more draws on it, even though the investment return is covering those. It's just covering those so that you're not really gaining down the road, so your funding level is staying pretty flat, even though we had a good enough return so that, just as an example, our police pension last year, our police pension minimum requirement went up $500,000. So this going up $250,000 is actually pretty good, because I would have expected it to actually go up more than the $500,000 last year, because again, we did a minimum, not the recommended. But we're seeing some of the benefit of that return by it only going up $250,000. So
I noticed last year they only do the actuarial calculation once a year, right?
Correct.
And so we kind of got hit with the dip of 2020, and when they did that,
they do a point-in-time analysis. So
in extraordinary situations, is there ever a condition where that can be adjusted, or kind of like a reevaluation?
You probably could, but by the time, for the cost of that, by the time you got that done, you'd probably be getting close to your next actuarial calculation anyway, which theoretically now should take in, like, if they do it as of April 30th, and that's where there happened to be a dip in value, and let's say it came back in May, your April of next year valuation should now show that value at a higher amount, and that calculation will reflect kind of that recovery. So I don't know if the statutorily you can get that, because by the time it goes through the actuary, which there's a fee with all of that, and then it has to be refiled with the state for them to get you your minimum contribution and calculation, and all that has to be done before we actually adopt the levy in December. So you've got a real small time window, and then you're creeping up again 5 to 6 months later for another valuation.
David, are you finished?
Yeah.
David, would you say that tweaking the actuarial tables, extending the time period, and then making other adjustments like return on investments, is that the ultimate solution to the pension issue that we face?
No, I mean, first of all, we don't have any control over that. That's set by the actuarial industry of what's accepted for what they have to use for returns and expectancy and state statutes and stuff. The ultimate solution would be extending the amortization period to be fully funded. And I mean, I hate to say it because it's just more taxes, but I think that the pension fund should be pulled out separately from your PTEL cap, so that you can levy what's required to pay these obligations, so that we're not continuing to increase this every year to basically pay interest from prior underpayments. We're limited on that cap, and you can't get out of that credit card debt unless you can pay more towards those bills.
I guess what I'm getting at is we really can't affect the state statutory requirements for the pension funds.
Correct.
That is the responsibility of our legislators.
Correct.
So we need to make an appeal to our legislators to address these issues. And about how long do you think we could survive without making any changes to our pension obligations?
I think the liquidity of it, they basically said like 2060, but all that does is say,
how long can we last in our?
oh, with this, next year I'm expecting that we will have $0 of our levy going to our general fund
So
operations.
this is approaching a kind of a crisis.
Yes, because if they go up another, as you can see, this shows $400,000, but I'm expecting it to be more in the $240,000 range. If these pension funds go up another $500,000 next year, we only have $240,000 of our general fund. That goes to 0, and then we still need to come up with $250,000. So now we're not even dipping into tax dollars. We're dipping into sales tax dollars, income tax dollars to make those payments. So that's 100% dollar for dollar cut in our operational funds at that point.
And we're not the only municipality that's facing these kind of issues in the state of
We're
Illinois.
not.
So really, the appeal needs to go to our legislators to address these issues, provide some relief to municipalities.
Once we adopt this will be forwarded to our legislators to explain that something has to happen before next year,
Yeah.
because we are in a dire situation too.
So the 2% cushion that we're putting into this levy, if the EAB goes up, then we can use that cushion.
Correct.
If it goes down or stays we have an estimate right now. If it stays at this estimate, is it our plan to reduce the levy to the 1.4%?
It'll automatically be reduced.
Okay.
So basically, we filed this $8,072,000. They'll come back to us and say, okay, we need a final signed extension, and it'll have a column that says, here's what you asked for, here's what you're going to reduce. They'll fill it in proportionately, but they'll say, if you want to change it, you choose where to take the reduction from, but you have to reduce.
Yeah.
And what will be extended, this is the levy we request, what will be extended, a tax extension, will be what they actually bill and collect. And that will be more in the $7.9 million range that I estimate.
Worst case scenario for our tax-paying residents would be a decrease in our city's tax rate of 2.8%, best case would be a decrease of 4.72%.
Correct.
Is that right? So I really commend you for the way you put this together to provide a decrease in the tax rate. I think that's moving in the right direction. And as I look at these funds, we're actually either keeping the levy flat or reducing it in most of our funds except for our pension and retirement funds.
Correct.
So thank you for that.
Are there any further questions from the commissioners or from the public? Hearing none. Do I just declare, the clerk, do I just declare this closed?
Yes.
I'll declare the public hearing closed. Thank you all for your input, and thank you, David, for the presentation. Next item on the agenda is citizens' comments. Sir. Mary Lou Hildebrand, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. During the month of November, your ESNA volunteers assisted the police department with traffic for an accident, brought out our light towers for their accident investigation, and provided assistance for public safety when the traffic lights malfunctioned at 29th and Sheridan. We did the monthly siren test and opened the center for the annual tests and maintenance for the sprinkler systems and other equipment. We assisted the park district with the food pantry. In addition to this, we did duty time to maintain our equipment as the center, as well as our monthly meeting and training. We served a total of 93 and a quarter hours for a savings for the city of over $2,661. If you wish to serve our city as a volunteer, go to the city website and select a time to fill out an application. We would welcome new members to our group. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. Mr. Brumner?
Pro Tim Fisher, Gentle Lady, Honorable Sirs, I'm W.C. Brumner. First, I did, as Mayor McKinney has always requested, I talked with Director Roberts. I now come to the City Council, as he said, there was nothing he could do under the circumstances. Driving up and down Elam, Elizabeth, and Edina from 21st to 31st, and the various east-west streets, there were a lot of leaves piled up on the parkway, apparently waiting to get picked up. Why they did not get picked up during the 4 weeks of leaf pickup, I don't know. I'm bringing it to your attention and requesting that the City Council consider the idea of one special leaf pickup before the weather changes, get rid of all the leaves that are piled up and residents are apparently waiting for a pickup. Why they didn't get the word, or if something happened on, I believe, Monday the 22nd, I don't know, but I'm bringing it to your attention for your consideration. I thank you for your time, your courtesy, and your attention to this matter. I request permission to stand down, sir.
You may stand down. Thank you, sir. Mr. Jerry Callahan.
Yes, I'm here for one of the agenda items in case you have any questions. I think I listed the agenda item there, which is 10A. Going to come around the
All right.
There's an ordinance.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If you would like to answer any questions at that time,
yes,
that would be fine.
we're available, and John Mangle is here as well.
All right. Mr. Mangle, do you want to reserve that time? All right. I'm going to take a moment as chair just to note a couple of items, just to mark that today is the 80th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, so that we should take a moment just to recall the loss of our sailors and Marines and soldiers and airmen in that attack. And related to that, we should mark the passing of one of that generation, the late Senator Robert Dole. Just part of that generation that's going away. So we just take a moment to remember them. And regarding Senator Dole, if you get a chance, read Richard Ben Kramer's book, What It Takes, about the 1988 presidential election. I think you'll find some fascinating revelations about all the candidates in that race. But I learned quite a bit about Senator Dole, and I think you'll be impressed. So just want to make note of that. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, approval of minutes.
Approval of minutes of the regular meeting held on November 16th, 2021 at 7 p.m. and approval but not release of closed session minutes of a meeting held on November 16th, 2021 at 7:55 p.m.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Next item is bills.
Bills, vouchers 139283 through 139426, drawn on Huntington National Bank, total $906,298.23.
Is there a motion on the bills?
So moved.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Item 8, consider passing a resolution as follows. A, Community Development Block Grant, funds for assistance for public sidewalk replacement and installation of handicap ramps per Director Roberts.
Thank you, sir. Attached is a resolution that the city is required to pass for some submittal of an application for the 2022 Lake County Community Development Block Grant. Staff is seeking grant assistance from Lake County for public sidewalk replacement, installation of ADA ramps at various locations throughout the city. If the grant is approved, the grant will provide $80,000 towards an estimated $115,000 project. Staff requests and recommends approval of this resolution.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Hearing none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Item 9A, ordinances providing for the levy and taxes for the city of Zion, Lake County, Illinois, for tax levy year 2021 to be collected in the year beginning January 1, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2022 per Administrator Nabel.
Thank you. I won't rehash everything I said in the public hearing, but I would recommend the approval of the ordinance for the levy in the amount of $8,072,338 as presented.
Is there a motion?
I will make the motion.
Second.
Is there any further discussion or questions? Thank you, David, for your hard work. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Item 9B, approving and authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation related to the maintenance of traffic signals on state highways within or near corporate limits of the city of Zion per Director Roberts.
Thank you, sir. Within your packet is an intergovernmental agreement with IDOT for the state maintaining traffic signals on the state highways. The current IGA expired June 2021. The new IGA period will be effective from July 2021 to June 30th, 2031. Maintenance costs are based on the district's electrical maintenance contracts, related bid costs, and may vary throughout contract to contract. Exhibit A provides traffic signal locations and the city's share of the maintenance costs. Staff requests and recommends approval of the intergovernmental agreement with IDOT.
Is there a motion?
Make the motion that we approve this IGA for traffic signals.
Second.
Are there any discussion or questions, comments?
The only question I had was, with it being out of contract, is there any trouble with recouping for that dead period?
No, I had already discussed it with them, and said as long as this is on this meeting for approval, we're okay.
Thank you.
All right. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Item 9C, extending a variance from Zion Municipal Code, Section 102-6068, Article 12, Adult Use Cannabis, for property located at 3101, 3199 16th Street, per Director Ianson.
Thank you, sir. Elevated Organics LLC is requesting a 180-day extension to the variance for the adult use cannabis diffuser and adult use process of the property located at 3101 to 3199 16th Street.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Do we have any update about the legislation from the state for the approval of licenses?
They're now anticipating sometime this month they might get an answer, but in the meantime, they're running out of time, so they're asking for this.
Thank you.
Yes, I would just add that the reason that we have to keep extending these special use permits is because the state seems to be incapable of deciding how to issue licenses. This is now a process that's been going on for a couple of years now, isn't it? So if you have any conversations with your state representatives, you might want to encourage them to get off the dime so that we can start collecting some revenue. Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Next item on the agenda is extending a variance from Zion Municipal Code, Section 102-6088, Article 12, Adult Use Cannabis, for property located at 3101, 3199 16th Street, per Director Ianson.
Thank you, sir. Same request from Elevated Organics LLC, requesting a 180-day extension to a variance for the adult use cannabis transportation organization for the property located at 3101 to 3199 16th Street.
Is there a motion?
I make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'll spread the question out. Since they're running like three different elements of the Cannabis Use Act, has there been any changes with their design for that property? And has any of that been looked at in terms of like IDOT and the cutaways that we were talking about over on that way?
Hasn't been presented to the city yet.
Okay, thank you.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. And here we are, item E. E, extending a special use permit to operate an adult use cannabis craft grow for property located at 3101, 3199 16th Street, per Director Ianson.
Thank you, sir. Again, Elevated Organics LLC is requesting a 180-day extension to the special use permit for the adult cannabis craft grow for the property located at 3101 to 3199 16th Street.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Item 10A, for discussion authorization approval, consider zoning docket 21Z16 and ordinance requesting a special use permit for a new owner for self-storage facility located at 3355 Sheridan Road for Director Ianson.
Thank you, sir. PSC Vision Plans for Property LLC is requesting a special use permit for a new owner for a self-storage facility located at 3355 Sheridan Road. Extra Space Storage LLC is the current operator and contract purchaser that will require a new special use to operate. At the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last Thursday, they recommend to approve the special use.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Is there any discussions or questions for representatives here?
I just have one. So you're Mr. Mango?
John Mango, yes.
So are you a developer or?
Yes.
Okay. Have you worked on any other properties here in Zion, or have your sights set on any?
Not in Zion, no, not yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions I can answer? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, with no further discussion, we have a motion and second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Item 10B, request permission to fill 4 patrol officer vacancies and request the names of the next 2 qualified candidates from the Police and Fire Commission lateral eligibility list and the next 2 qualified candidates from the Police and Fire Commission eligibility list per Chief Barney.
Thank you, sir, and commissioners. I respectfully request the City Council approve the hiring of the next 2 qualified candidates from the lateral entry final eligibility register compiled by the Zion Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. I additionally request the approval for hiring 2 candidates from the initial eligibility list totaling 4 positions to be filled. This hiring is necessary to replace officers who have resigned and or taken employment with other agencies. Currently, the ZPD, or Zion Police Department, is down 5 sworn officer positions as of, we believe, May is our final projecting time. 2 lateral candidate names and 2 new entry candidate names have been released by the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. Lateral hire candidates will fill 2 of the 5 open positions. Additionally, 2 police academy slots are reserved for 2 new entry positions candidates in January of 2022. The department will be fully staffed once at 45 sworn officers. When a police academy opening becomes available, I will approach council for consideration to fulfill the final available position at that time.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Question? Thank you very much, Chief. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Item 10C, request permission to hire 3 full-time firefighter paramedics for Chief Street.
Good evening, Commissioners and Mayor Pro Tem. Upon thorough evaluation and discussion with Administrator Nabel, I am respectfully requesting approval to hire 3 full-time firefighter paramedics from our hiring list. This would not require an amendment to our 21-22 personnel authorization, but would require a budget amendment to include 3 additional positions. Administrator Nabel's previous email detailing various related discussion points is attached to this request. However, I wish to briefly detail some of the more beneficial reasons that this would increase service delivery to the city, as well as better support the men and women of our department. It would reduce overtime work for our already taxed firefighter paramedics. Having an additional position on some duty shifts would allow us to occasionally staff a fire vehicle with 3, which is industry standard at a very minimum. Our hiring list, established August 10th of this year, is already at number 10 of number 16 after filling those previous 3 vacancies. The hiring pool across the suburbs is shrinking, and hiring now will potentially alleviate a lengthy delay when hiring in the future, as well as eliminate the need to test sooner than the every 2-year standard, which is an additional city expense. After Administrator Nabel's budget analysis based on numbers so far this fiscal year, the net budget impact of these hires is approximately $23,000. This request sets duty shift levels at 8. which includes 6 full-time positions, 1 battalion chief, 1 lieutenant, 4 firefighter paramedics, as well as 2 paid on-premise part-time firefighter paramedics. The current labor agreement with Local 1999 stipulates that a minimum of 7 be on duty each day, which would mean in many instances sick time or other benefit time use would not create an overtime need. So I respectfully, and it's my honor to make this request of you on behalf of your Fire and Rescue Department.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Discussion?
So we've had a lot of discussion here about pension. So can you speak to how these moves still make sense?
It's still going to have a pension impact. Ultimately, we're adding 3 bodies to the pension pool, but I mean, there's no way around that. It's going to add to it, but there is a certain amount of. They look at our contracts when they look at the actuarial calculations. So part of that is kind of baked into the numbers, because right now our MOU is a 2472, which allows us to use more POPs. Our actual contract does not have the additional use of the POPs. So until the next year's negotiations to see if we make that a part of the contract, they're still anticipating this staffing level, because that actually I think that's actually at an 8 per shift under a 2448, with only 1 being allowed to be a part-time person. So we'd still be at 24 potentially full-time firefighters at the actuarial calculation. It doesn't alleviate any of that future burden.
Right.
But I mean, the goal is never to go to like a full-time or a part-time or volunteer type department. That's the only way you're going to ever reduce that liability. So it doesn't have a large impact, but it doesn't alleviate the burden either.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything further? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Item 11 is departmental commentary. So we'll just do a quick round the room. Director Ianson, do you have anything?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Last couple of months, I've been reporting on the progress of demolition on Galilee there. I can now report it's 100% done. Everybody go by, take a look at the site. Thanks.
Director Roberts, do you want to talk about leaves?
I was going to play dumb on that.
No, we still want him employed here, and I don't want to get a pink slip or a resignation letter from him.
I have had many discussions with my residents. This year's been a very difficult year in the timing on these leaves. Combine that with the contractual contract with Waste Management and the timing of their aspect also of that, because they hire additional part-time help with that. We did delay. We skipped a week. That tried to help push that out. I am not going to try and get into the argument of they just passed me up or the contractor saying we picked them all up. I can't say for sure either way. However, we were out, myself and engineering, and kind of spot checking. We provided addresses to the contractor. The week after the final round, they did go back to those addresses that we saw that they did not pick up. Director Ianson and myself had a meeting with Waste Management over the whole program, not just the leaf program, but the garbage pickup too. There's been problems there also that we are trying to address. The contract is going to be up in 2023. Director Ianson and myself are going to sit down at the table with them next year, next spring, and bring up a lot of these issues and see if we can addressing this in the new contract. To kind of go a little farther with my discussion with Mr. Bremner as far as adding a week, I did talk to the contractor on extending a week. However, the additional cost increase for that, I weighed out as not being acceptable to an already fund that is running behind. It's approximately $250,000.
We're about a $250,000 deficit now.
$250,000 deficit. To add another $40,000 on that just for 1 week of pickup, I did not feel that was a good use of money. We can still bag it and store it. They will come around. We still have 2 more pickups in the spring. I know that's a ways off. The other thing we are providing, if we're calling Public Works, is we have found a couple places that residents can take their leaves to if they want to. However, it's going to be an additional charge. It's not free.
Yeah. Just to
Other
pivot
than
on
the leaves, not cut you off, sir, but with the leaves that are still on the parkway, we do not have the systems to pick those up. So they're just going to stay there, or they're going to push with the snow plows. Our sweeper is already running way behind because it's trying to go around the larger piles, but there's still a lot of leaves out there. That it's picking up too. And that's an additional cost, because every load we take that comes out of that sweeper, we still pay for that.
Right.
Also.
Just to clarify for the public, because there's some people who think that the cost for the leaf pickup comes out of their property taxes. It does not. It is actually...
It's actually part of your, built into the garbage rate that you pay. I want to say it's about $1.94 a month.
It works out
Is that what we added?
$24
A year.
per resident for the 6 pickups.
For the 6 pickups, right?
That does not impact the bagging. The bagging is separate from that.
Right.
The $24
It's just for the leaf pickup, the vacuum.
The vacuum.
Right.
Which I challenge anybody to get somebody to come out and vacuum at one time for them for $24.
So essentially, we collect that fee, it goes into a fund, and that pays the contract with Waste Management for that service. So if we extend past that, we have to take that money from someplace else if we don't have it. So that's why we could not extend another week, because we just don't have the money.
You know, I would like to point out that this is not a new issue. This is something we have every year,
Right.
regardless of the end date of the program. If we extended it another week, you'd still have individuals that see the sweeping out there and go, oh, I better go rake it out. And they're still out there at the end of the program.
Right.
So, you know, it's not, it could address some of the leaves that are out there, but then we'd still have this issue. We always have.
Right.
With this going on beyond the last week.
Right.
That we actually do the pickup. So that was another part of the reason why we couldn't really justify the extra. I think it was 30,000, somewhere in that range.
I think it was total was going to be 35.
Okay. So, like I said, we don't have the money, and it doesn't fully address the issue.
Right. Okay. Anything else, Director Roberts?
I'm done, sir.
Are we ready for snowplows? We're ready, because that'll be a whole different round of complaints when the snowplows come.
I just roll right into them.
Okay.
One right after the other. However, while you are talking snow, I would like to bring up on parking. Since the snow is coming, remember that there's no parking from 2 o'clock in the morning to 6 in the morning or during an event. And I know if you read our notice online, it talks about 4 inches or more as an event. There's several areas where there were so many cars parked that we could not get a plow down through. And that was even during the icing events. So
So if we can't salt, that road's still gonna be dangerous until we can get in there, so hopefully people will move in vehicles. No,
I think you're done. All right. Chief Street, please.
Just wanted to say thank you again for your support of your fire and rescue department. The only item I'll bring your attention to is I emailed the November activity report to you today. If you haven't got a chance to see that, please do. One item I'll highlight from that is the CPR device that you approved through IPRF grant funds from about 2 months ago. We have received that. We have put it in service. We've used it numerous times with success rates, bringing back cardiac arrest patients, including at least one, possibly more, that's expected to make a full recovery. So it's a very valuable piece of equipment that I'll probably be approaching you for another in the near future, hopefully with grant funds, but if not, we're certainly going to maybe try to find some budget funds for it as well. A very valuable piece of equipment, and with good success so far, so thank you.
Thank you. Chief Barton.
Good evening, sir. Again, thank you. I do want to just piggyback on what Director Roberts said about the parking. We did have a lot of issues last year with parking on city streets. 2 to 6, we're still enforcing those and writing citations. But anytime there's a snow event that the plow operators, they do call us and they let us know where they can't get through. So understand that if they're not getting through, we're probably going to be writing citations and potentially even towing vehicles off the roadway if we need to. So understand that that's coming. Secondly, I know the weather's getting cooler or colder, let's be honest. And reminder, if you do choose to warm up your vehicle, make sure you lock it. The rate of stolen cars, as we've seen nationwide, has increased. So it is our recommendation that you do not do that, or if you do that, you don't leave your keys in the car. And then lastly, I just want to highlight and thank the community members and partnerships that did come out for our 5th Shop with a Cop, 5th annual Shop with a Cop. This year we were able to select 40 families, 40 kids from the schools, which is tremendous. This program has grown every year. To the point now where we're going to have to expand just because of the involvement by nature of it has grown so much, so we're going to involve other schools and districts. And then the community partners that we've partnered with have expressed tremendous desire to continue that partnership and grow even more to involve more families. So just a nice thing to spread some holiday cheer and bring some light to some of these young individuals in our community. That's all I got.
Thank you. Administrator Nabel, do you have anything else you want to
I'm going to take a little break from talking about water shutoffs, though. With it getting colder and with us going to the holidays, please make sure you keep your water utility current. You pay your bill. The risk of pipes breaking, things of that, go up significantly when you have water shut off. You have stagnant flow in the pipes. But I will ask the public, the quarterly Zion magazine that goes out to the community, on the heels of what we were talking about a little bit with the state grant, our financial situation, the levy, we are still working federally for the Stranded Act to try and get compensation for the spent fuel rods that are left here as basically leaving Zion as a nuclear storage site, de facto storage site. We're still trying to push that. There's kind of a call to action in the magazine to contact Congressman Brad Schneider and Senator Tammy Duckworth to let them know you're paying attention, let them know you expect this of them to get action to get that bill out of committee to the floor for a vote. So they're not gonna do it on their own unless they get some heat from the voters. So please keep an eye out for that in the magazine, and there'll be information on there on where to call or write letters to try and light a little fire under it.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have anything they want to bring up or share with the public? I already took the stage once tonight. I'm not going to do it again. So we move on to announcements. December 21st, 6:15 p.m., Zion Town Board meeting, and at 7 p.m., the Zion City Council meeting. December 23rd, 24th, 30th, and 31st, the city offices will be closed for the holidays. January 4th is our next Zion City Council meeting of the first one of 2022. Next, we need to move to closed session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 open meetings for the discussion of threatened and or probable imminent litigation, collective bargaining, purchase or sale of real estate, and personnel. Is there a motion to move to closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Holmes?
Aye.
Commissioner Fryerson?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Fisher?
Aye. Are we going to move to the conference room, or do we want to do it in here?
I think we should probably just keep it out here. So I'll ask everyone, we have one item to take action on after closed session. If you'd like to stick around, you can do so. We'll open back up council chambers. Otherwise, have a good night, everyone.